So my name's Deb Jones. I live here in Friendly Neighbors. I had been on the Friendly board for 7 years. I'm also on our emergency preparedness team. And we have, this past year, we started offering these monthly skill building sessions to give folks a chance to drill down in one topic or another. Tonight we're talking about some of EWEB's programs regarding power outages and winter preparedness. In the past, we've talked about radios for family use.
Fire extinguishers?
Fire extinguishers, yes. Fire suppression. Our next session in January is going to be first aid topic focused on stopping bleeding. And tonight we've got Rod Price, who's the Chief Operations Manager at EWEB. And you've got some things to share. I know other people have other questions about EWEB related topics, and we can have general discussion about winter preparedness.
All right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I had a few things that Thea had talked about that she suggested I cover. So talking about the snowstorm we had in the spring, you know, what is EWEB doing for winter prep, and then, you know, what can you folks do to prepare as well. First thing though, I was just telling Deb that I was eating dinner with my wife and watching the news. Anybody watching the news in California? What's going on there? And so the natural question is maybe what is EWEB doing around some of that? You know, PG&E is doing some what they call planned shutdowns. You know, they're shutting people's power off proactively, which is, you know, I've been in the business for 30 years, and in all my career I've been taught you keep the power on 100% of the time, right? So it really goes against the grain of the utility business to do this. It's a very difficult transition. So EWEB, first of all, what I would say is there's three things that make those fires go. Wind is one, so we got some wind going on tonight, right? But there's also dry fuel. Eugene does not have a lot of dry fuel, let's be honest. And two, low humidity. So again, Eugene doesn't have a lot of low humidity. So I believe our risk of fire is relatively small compared to what they have. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't hear the last one.
Humidity.
Humidity, thanks.
Yeah, so you're talking about like humidity levels way down in the 5s and those kind of percents. It just creates a blowtorch, you know. And, there's a lot of electrical equipment. If you've got any kind of energy source, it can spark a fire, right? One of the things that we're doing is actually there's two or three parts to it. I do spend a lot of time talking to folks in the utilities in California and trying to learn from them. Utilities are very good about sharing. So one of the things they do is they create these what they call risk maps. And then they go and attack and target the equipment in the higher risk areas. So we've been working with the state of Oregon has some risk maps that they've set up. So we've taken their data and overlaid our equipment on it. Really, we have a very low risk service territory, and our highest, what I would call highest risk, is the South Hills and then upriver. So this year we took that map and we went to our tree trimmers and had them go through the entire South Hills and the upriver system, and we doubled our tree trimming inspections and what we call hot spotting, which is trimming trees that are even remotely active and close to lines. So that was one of the proactive things we've done. But the other thing we're doing is looking at the designs and maintenance and all the things that the folks in California are looking at too, and starting to look at our system and see how we fall in that. You know, we've got UF's got equipment that's older than I am. There's a lot of stuff that's put in before I was born, which is kind of a mind-boggling kind of thing. But we're looking at systematically upgrading poles and that kind of thing. The other thing is, though, we do at any one time have the ability to turn anybody off for any reason. And we don't do that. Again, like I was saying, it's kind of against the grain naturally to do that, so we're not really trained to do that, but we're working on with our processes and our procedures to work in. We have a system, so like if you have a fire at your house, or there's a car hit pole and the fire department's there, the fire department calls up and says, hey, we need to disconnect this circuit, so we go ahead and disconnect that circuit. So we're taking those same procedures and making it so working with fire departments and red flag kind of things, we'll be able to turn off power and be ahead of that a little bit. But we're nowhere near close to where California is, but I don't think we have the same threat. I would ask, just for fun, I think we have a bigger threat here. Does anybody have a thought what that might be?
Well, there are a lot of houses, especially the older ones in the downtown area, that have a lot of foliage growing right up against them and stuff all over the roof, needles, piles, and that sort of thing. And, you know, that's just a torch if it goes on.
Yeah, it is, but I think we've got a bigger threat here in this
Possibly
area.
earthquake.
I'd say earthquakes possible. I'd say there's another. What does it do here all the time? 9 months out of the year. It rains, right? Flooding. Yeah, and we have not had a 300-year flood event. We have dams now that control the flooding, but if one of those breaks, you get one of these super floods, I think we're more likely to get a flood than a fire or an earthquake, but that's just my own personal opinion.
And would that be if the dam breaks, or even with all that dam stuff? I mean, Alton Baker looked pretty cool last April.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
with water up over the sun.
Yeah, and those aren't, 300-year events. Those are typical kind of.
Well, and that was an issue of they were holding back, and it was like, this shouldn't have happened in April.
Yeah.
You know, if that rain had come in January, the dams would have accommodated, as I understand.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
dams
and they do a
Right.
great job controlling that.
But are you saying a flood event, even with all the dams in place, we're still susceptible to that?
I would say it's more likely, right? It just does rain a lot here, and that's sort of the fact. That's what we have as natural weather. And one of the things that I think I get a lot of questions on is EWEB prepared for the future? We've got climate change, we've got wildfires, we've got somebody said earthquakes. It's a tough question to answer. I'd say that I don't know, but I will tell you that what we've done is implemented in our strategic plan, which again, to you folks is a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but internally for EWEB, it's very important. So in 2017, we implemented a strategic plan which basically focuses on resiliency and restoration. And then we also power supply too, which is a different story. But what that really does and has focused staff on spending money on projects that are geared towards both resiliency and restoration. So I want to differentiate a little bit between resiliency and restoration. So restoration is event-driven. So you have a snowstorm, and I'll talk a little bit more about the snowstorm, but you have an event and you react to it. And how well we react to it is sort of our typical run-a-business kind of thing. Resilience is a different thing. It's more about being prepared for what we think might be coming. And the earthquake's a good thing. Even getting trees off the houses might be another. But it's being prepared ahead of time so that we can recover. The University of Oregon is sponsoring a lady named Dr. Lucy Jones, and she's from, I want to say, Caltech or somewhere down there. And she's been working with the city of Los Angeles for the last 10 years. Getting them ready to be more resilient, getting them ready for that big earthquake, and maybe even the wildfires. What she's doing and what she talks about are a couple things. One is it's a lot cheaper ahead of time to prepare, right? So $8 to $10 per dollar cheaper if you prepare ahead of time. And the other thing is she talks a lot about, and if you get a chance to see her while she's here this semester, and she's doing some lectures around, I'd recommend going to see her. The other thing she talks about though is if you have a major earthquake, an event, how fast the area gets back to recovery has a direct effect on if they'll stay in business, if they'll stay in as a community. You know, if you think about an earthquake and Florence floods and tidal waves and all that, if they don't get back up and running somehow towards normal in 2 to 3 months, they probably never will. And it's just, so she goes through that kind of thing. So EWEB is, my targets are to get emergency services up within 2 weeks. So emergency services are like, this center right here perhaps would have an emergency water site and maybe a power site. It doesn't mean that your house is going to have power or electricity, right? Within 2 to 3 months, what I want to have happen is we complete our, what we're calling resilient spine, which is basically just, we're trying to create an electrical path between generation sources that are here local, which we have some at U of O and International Paper, Stanica, maybe our upriver generation. Anyway, some local generation. So we're trying to create a path to sewer wastewater, fire department, hospitals, some of those kind of things, our headquarters, Lane County Public Works, so, you know, critical facilities that can start bringing the area back up into a normal economic flow. So restoration and resiliency, those are the 2 key things that come out of our plan.
Can we take questions?
You bet. Fire away.
So I've heard, originally you were thinking, let's put another intake over on the Willamette
Yep.
in Glenwood.
Yep.
And as I understand it, you backed off of that in terms of, in favor of drilling wells, like at some of the high schools and having, so what's going to be our closest place where if the system went down and we weren't getting water through the pipes as normal, what would be the closest? You mentioned here, but you'd have to truck water here, right?
Yeah.
Where would you actually maybe have a well that you're creating water that we could go and get water from?
Yep.
It's close to here.
2 points. One is, so we're still working on that second source.
Okay.
So what we're not working on is a complete replacement for Hayden Bridge. We're working on a sort of a minimum version of that.
Right.
We're working with Springfield Utility Board with land and possibly sharing a system there that we can operate. The first thing we need to do is work with Springfield Utility Board so our systems can work together, though, our water systems, because we only have some loose connections. So first thing we're doing is working on creating stronger connections, and then we're trying to work with them on getting a joint water plan. So that's our target, probably a 10 to 15 year target. The emergency wells, though, are, let's see, right now we have 5 in planning, so we have 3 installed. Okay, one out in Bethel, Calpuia, Howard. Down here at the fairgrounds is probably the closest one. That one's should
But
be.
what's installed already?
There's the one at Howard and Calpuia.
Okay.
So basically it's a well. And Howard has a, what we call a microgrid as well, which is some battery, solar, diesel generator kind of combination. The idea is to put these stations in FEMA gathering places, which are typically schools.
So what's at the fairgrounds? That's interesting, that's close.
So the fairgrounds,
Or what's happening there?
excuse me, there will be a well, emergency well.
Is it going to be like the one at the school, I guess it's Howard School, where they had the big
Yes.
opening with
Yep.
the multiple,
Yep.
like spigots, I guess you'd call them, big spigots?
Yep.
That spigot array or whatever?
Yeah, so what she's referring to is we'll drill a well, we'll put a container out there, and of course it'll be fenced in and all that stuff. The cool thing about it, though, is it will be something that EWEB doesn't have to put together. So we've got instructions now, and we've tested this on various work groups that are basically that we're hoping school district staff or people and maybe neighborhood groups we can do some training with them to assemble that.
So they would be assembled, like the infrastructure would be there and they would assemble the access?
Yes.
If there's an emergency?
No, they should have brought some pictures, I guess. But basically, so the well hooks up to a distribution system of pipes and spigots and that kind of thing, so you can come up and fill it. Lots of, maybe 10, 15 people can fill their water tanks.
And that's us sitting in the container that's there.
Yeah.
that equipment.
So you have to take it out and assemble
Yeah,
it and hook it up.
so it's pretty strict. So you mentioned that one of them has a microgrid. Do
Yes.
the rest would depend on the generator being rolled
Yes.
up, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So again, that's where we're, I'm not sure about the Lane counties, so, we're looking at places where you do have a generator, or we'll put one in.
So the intent, that there would be a generator already on site is the intent?
Not necessarily. I mean, we're working with each agency, and so, we're kind of in the beginning phase of this.
So when might the fairgrounds well happen?
That should be done Q1 next year.
Really?
Yeah, we've got all the permits and everything ready for that.
Would
Is that-
microgrids be the preferred option if they were not too expensive, rather than generators?
They are, so a microgrid typically includes different things like a diesel generator, propane generator, solar, batteries, some of those kind of things. So it could be any one of those. Typically you have some batteries though, so we have some ability to store something. Fuels, in a Cascadia event, fuel, truck fuel, diesel fuel, all that, all comes from Portland. So we expect bridges to be down, we expect not to get fuel, so that's another thing we're working on as an interagency group, is trying to figure out how to get some local fuel storage here for our trucks. We can't do anything like that.
So for an individual household to be resilient, you'd be thinking, can I put 2 5-gallon water containers, 80 pounds, in a wheelbarrow and go down to the fairgrounds? Right, and get water for my family and wheel it home? Or drive it if the roads are drivable? Is that the kind of way that an individual family could prepare for that?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is eventually build out so that there's enough of them spread out that even if half of them fail, we could still get people that are walking
Yeah,
distance.
well, I'm thrilled to hear about the fairgrounds. Last I heard is that Eugene, the fairgrounds is pretty close to the friendly neighborhood.
Yeah, what's the new place that they're building, where the stadium burned down?
Civic?
Alliance.
Yeah, we're trying to look there. The South Hills is challenging for us because it's rock, and there's not a lot of groundwater. So out in the flats, there's a lot more groundwater.
Did you say that the systems like this are already at Howard and Calapooya?
Yes. Yep.
And are there photos of that?
Yes.
And you have them if I emailed you?
You bet. Yeah. Should have brought my card.
Is that on your website?
They had a big news thing on it, so if you Google it, you can
Oh, okay.
find it, right? I mean,
There's been
it was
news
a big
coverage.
event when you had the
Yeah.
grand opening.
Yeah, the TV news guys have videos.
So one of the things that I've been hearing about fires in California is that a lot of it is caused by power lines that are sparking and transmission lines. Is there any conversation about undergrounding our power sources, our power lines here?
Yeah, always. People always want me to underground.
And do we think about, I mean, the royal we, or does EWEB think about doing that, selectively doing that, strategically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's talk about undergrounding. So it costs 4 to 5 times the amount of money to underground that it does to go overhead. So we underground, so if you take a new service, and it's here in Eugene, and depending on codes and yada yada, typically new services in Eugene are underground. If somebody just comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to have this undergrounded, I would say our policy is that you need to pay for it. So in other words, you're converting from overhead to underground. So there's a number of challenges to going underground. There's permitting. If you have an overhead service, that means you got to change your service, right? So there's that cost. What we have done, so in the 2016 ice storm, we applied for $4 million worth of FEMA grants, and that's above and beyond the reimbursement for the storm. And those are resiliency grants. And so what we did is we targeted sections of line, and there's a handful of them around here, that were causing the most outage. So we took, I think, the top 15 or 20 most visited lists, if you want to call it that. And have been, we're down to, I think we've got three or four more of those projects to do and complete. So we are undergrounding where it makes sense from a resiliency and a restoration effort to speed it up.
So all new development in the vicinity is being, like, something that's fairly new, like Crescent Village would be undergrounded automatically because it's new, or no?
Pretty much, yes.
Pretty much, yes.
And I qualify that with everybody, pretty much. Yeah.
Interesting.
Can you speak to the renovation that's going to happen on Willamette Street? What I read was undergrounding was not going to happen there.
Yep, so we took a look at that. So one of the things that happens too, sometimes we have to put stuff underground as if, like, if we're in the city right away, and they have a project and they say we want it underground. You have to have it underground. So okay, we got to do that because that's what he said. But typically we bill them too. So what the normal process is the city has projects that they churn out, and but they plan, right? So typically 3-4 years in advance, and then they send us the plans, and we go through and decide if we can join them underground or whatever. There's conflicts is really what we do. So in the case of Willamette, they came to us and we looked at both water and electric and asked and decided if we wanted to join them in their, because they were repaving, or I can't remember what they're doing exactly, repaving and kind of widening the road and modernizing it, I guess. In that case, it was like a $2 million price tag or $1.4 million price tag for us to go ahead and underground there. So we chose not to in electric. Water, though, we had plans to replace that main anyway, so we went ahead and replaced the main. So we spent maybe, I want to say, $25,000 redoing what we did there versus the millions. So just for beautification alone, if all the business owners along there had gotten together and said, hey, we'll pay X amount, we probably would have considered it at the time, but it's not part of our normal process to put it underground just for aesthetic reasons.
Okay.
Unless somebody comes to us with a big check and says, here's what we like. And that happens too. People do that. Developers do that.
I have a question about electricity. The thing on the news tonight was talking about people with limited resources, disabilities, special needs, in terms of electricity. Because water, you can go and get it, or you can put it in a bucket and carry it around. Electricity, not so easy.
Yep.
So what's the plan for distributing electricity in the event of some hazard for, people who aren't able to come and get it?
Yep, that's a great question. And so we even struggled with this in the storm in the spring, right? We have, there's a number of folks that are on oxygen or whatever the particular thing is. And in a lot of cases, we have those notes in our customer service records. But literally, there's a lot of times where there's nothing we can do. We can't get to the street or whatever it is. And so it is kind of a conundrum because we, of course, we'd like to respond to that, but we can't get to it. And it's the same with the PGE kind of thing. At one point, what I think that needs to happen is it's one of those joint efforts where there's a social thing, there's a practical thing, and then there's sort of this utility kind of thing. One of my points in here is going through this is moving ahead. The best way to be resilient is for us to work, us being public agencies, and even some privates, is to work together. Because an earthquake, storm, it's not just folks that are on oxygen. Typically the poor, the disadvantaged, those folks, there's a social inequity that happens with natural, they don't have the money. Can they prepare for 2 weeks? Part of my spiel is be prepared for 2 weeks. Be prepared to go camping for 2 weeks. You're going to be camping for 2 weeks, right? That means bathroom, internet, all those things are coming. So you have to prepare, well, that's really tough for a lot of people in this community, right? Is that an EWEB problem? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a community problem, right? So we're willing to work with people, and so there's I think more and more steam is gathering where we're trying to sit down and solve. I went to a mayor's conference a month ago on this. I went to, there's 2 or 3 groups right now meeting to how are we going to be resilient to this disaster kind of thing. So I'm not answering your question directly, other than we can't always do and provide. But we are working on some programs for to provide generators at cost kind of thing, no interest loans. Yeah.
And if the grid went down,
Yep.
could we expect that even if you had a way to get water to pour down to flush your toilet fairly soon, that's not going to work?
So one of my number 1 priorities, water first, wastewater second. So, yeah.
Getting water to people first and then getting wastewater away.
Yeah, both those take power.
Yep.
So we're working on those resilient circuits, those connecting circuits that get all this together. So we're going to start putting money into hardening those circuits, creating those paths.
So here on the Friendly, we can't assume that sewage just naturally flows downhill to the sewage treatment plant. It needs electricity to get there, right?
I'm not a wastewater expert, but I would say, yeah, they use a lot of power.
There's pump stations along the way. So I happen to work, I'm a planning person for the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, and so we're working on resiliency planning, very similar to what Rob's talking about for EWEB, looking at where the critical pieces of the infrastructure are, and then where we want to focus the hardening. But yeah, you can expect that it's going to be down for a while with the Cascadia earthquake, particularly. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So. There's pump stations along the way. I don't remember, the wastewater treatment plant is downhill from this location, but there's still, I mean, those are deep lines, and there are a couple pump stations, lift stations along the way to convey it there. So, yeah.
Is that a problem with the snow, like if we have another big snow emergency and also with flooding? Is it, regardless of the emergency, you're going to have, that's going to be an issue? Or is it like after so many days that it's an issue?
Without power?
Yeah.
Sewage backup, you mean?
Sewage, yeah.
And you can help here too, but so if you have a Cascadia event, the problem is your pipes are going to break.
That's what I was going to.
And so then you're going to be also challenged with power and broken pipes. With the snow and the rain, the flood, that kind of thing. Flooding it creates other kinds of things, but it's not as much of a challenge because I know you guys have backup generators and that kind of thing. So I think it's a less of an issue except for that Cascadia earthquake kind of thing.
So I have a question. So in EWEB's monthly emergency preparedness information,
Yeah.
is there information about preparing, about not having a sewer system? So one of the things we just talked about with our neighborhood group was someone has a compostable toilet set up. There's WAG bags that people who camp or do spelunking, caving use. I mean, there are things you can put in your emergency preparedness kit that can help with that.
Yep.
And I don't know if you covered it in your
There was a
monthly
section. There was one.
web preparedness stuff.
There was the 2-bucket system.
Yeah.
It's there.
Okay, so it's in there.
Yeah, you can do a lot with the two
Yeah.
Jerry's buckets.
I had a question about, you had debriefing after the winter storm
Yeah.
last spring. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys learned from that experience and how things might look different going forward after that?
Yeah. So let me start with 2016 and the ice storm. We had, give or take, let's say 24,000 services out. And we had 200 people working in the office, and we had over 100 in the field, linemen and tree trimmers, that kind of thing. And the big lesson learned out of that is things didn't go very well for us. From both a public relations standpoint, we couldn't get information to customers, we couldn't track our own information, we had people helter skelter. It wasn't the best experience that we've been around. So we sat down and said, what do we do about this? And that's where this strategic plan came in and said, hey, we need to get better at this. The culmination really was, in the spring, we had 20,000 customers out. We had 300 people in the office working, and we had 70 folks in the field. So the lesson learned there is we upped our support staff for the guys in the field, got tremendously more efficient at it. So we, in the same time frame with half as many crews, we got about the same amount of work done, spent about the same amount of money. So one of the lessons we learned was that with our new process and everything, we had about as many crews as we could handle. So now what we're working on is, well, what if we had 10 more crews? How can we do that? So we're working on our process and making it more efficient. Another thing we did not have in 2016 was our mapping and the system and our database. It was kind of a GIS. I'm an engineer, so I roll out acronyms a lot. But essentially we have this database that has everybody's space and equipment on it listed. We also invested in a product that helps us manage software. So my boss, Frank Lawson, he talks about outages a lot. He says, take a picture puzzle. You all done puzzles, right? 500,000 piece puzzles, whatever. Take a 20,000 piece puzzle and dump it on the floor. That's our outage to start with. Somehow you got to start gathering it around, and you got to figure out. And of course, all you want to know is, when's my piece going to get put back in there, right? That's all you care about. And so then we have 20,000, people asking about their piece. So we invested in software and trained in it that helps us gather those pieces together. That was a big plus from us from 2016 to this spring. What we learned though was in that spring outage is we needed work on that software and hardware. So we've made, and again, this is all behind the scenes, nobody cares except for people like me, right? But we made some pretty big advances in the hardware and software into that, including, and this was part of the problem we had, which was, if somebody hooked up your house, it got drawn in the wrong spot, and so your house had a meter with an address over on the other side of town, and for some reason your text is not working, and then you're frustrated, right? And so, or your outage map or something. And so then the software can't work as well. So we made a huge effort this summer to go through and map stuff correctly. And so that's going to be a big plus. We also learned that fatigue is an issue. We were working 16 to 20 hour days with 4 hours off approximately, and we sustained that for 10 days. It got, towards the end, it got a little thin. So there's a simple personnel management kind of thing that we could get a little better at. Yes. Another thing, and I wanted to touch on this a little bit. So if you remember the snow, in this case, it wasn't the heavy, there was a lot of powdery snow. And what we found is a lot of our power lines that fell down didn't de-energize. So normally when a line falls on the ground, it arcs and it blows a fuse or something back to the substation or whatever, because it creates a circuit. So if you think about snow, especially light fluffy snow, it's 90% air. So the wire would fall down and it thinks it's just laying in air, right? And we came across a lot of down lines that weren't de-energized. And fortunately, we didn't get any injuries. I think a few dogs, pets, they wander into those. And it falls in the snow and you can't see it. So, and a lot of times, if you look at poles, our wires are up on the high and they're not insulated, but down lower is like different communications. There's fiber, telephone, and whatnot. Those are bigger and thicker, and typically you'll see those and you think, well, we're safe. So my message here is really please stay away from any lines you see on the ground. Make sure you call EWEB, call the emergency services if you can't get a hold of you, whatever. police, fire, they all have lines to us too as well. Because we don't want people out there walking around trying to figure out what's going on and trying to help, hey, this is, what we're asking people is to really stay as far away as you can. If a tree's leaning on a power line, again, stay away from the tree. You just never know. So that's another learning we had that I'm not sure what we're going to do about it if we can do much of anything. Trying to think of what else did we learn. Overall, we had a very much more efficient, calm process. Our outage maps. That was the first storm we'd had our outage map in service. So I don't know, did everybody get a chance to look at the outage map?
Yeah. I used those. So my power was out for a week, and that's because it was a single house line.
Yes.
And I kind of understood that. So I was couch surfing, so I had internet at Wi-Fi at other people's places. So I was able to look at the map, and there were circles on it.
Yep.
And because I knew what my house was, I mean, it just has a general neighborhood, but I could tell that's my house, and that's probably somebody on that block and somebody on that block. So I could kind of follow it. And then I knew that a really big problem was in Walterville.
Yes.
So I was able to follow the news that there were so many people out up there, they went up there. And because mine was a single outage house, I knew I had to wait, and it just did. I think it took 7 or 8 days,
Yep.
but I was able to follow that to some extent.
Good. So what we did learn was that, you mentioned the blob, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's frustrating to people because their particular houses don't pop out of that blob sometimes.
But it
It's
gives
hard
you
to tell.
security too. I mean, people can't identify what houses don't have power and then no security system on.
Yep. And that's the reason we do that, is so we don't paint a big picture of my house is out and go rob me. But what we did learn though is people were getting frustrated because there were so many outages and it was so blobby that it was really hard to tell if we were making progress or not. So the thing we did over the summer is we added colors. So I should have memorized the colors, but I can't remember exactly what they are. But basically there's 3 colors now. One's you got an outage. EWEB knows there's an outage. The next one is, hey, we've sent somebody to look at it. So now if you look at the map, you'll go, oh, at least there's somebody on the way. The third one is there's actually somebody there restoring it, and then hopefully the time that's listed on the estimated time of repair is fairly accurate. So,
It'd be nice to have a little bit of a scoreboard, like the peak number of outages was this, and now we're down to that.
yep, we're going to do that too.
So I could tell at first, looking, I think it was blue, there were blue circles at first, so many.
Yeah.
And then as the week went on, there were fewer and fewer. But the one thing that I think could help in terms of getting out publicity is what happens to a lot of people is they finally get EWEB come out, and then they say, okay, you have to have an electrician come out
Yep.
and certify your mast.
Yep.
And then you go, oh, I've got to call an electrician. So that can take an extra week. So somehow, I think I've seen it in some places, but that is a big stumbling block for some people because they expect it all to be EWEB.
Yep.
And they don't know that they have to hire an electrician
Yep,
themselves.
so we're working on that too. So the turnaround time, we got down on average to a day or two for that electrician thing. So once the electrician, so we had, but it is a problem.
Well, yeah, getting an appointment with an electrician is the problem.
Yep.
I mean, not so much EWEB, but
Yep.
yeah, so EWEB comes, and then you find out you need an electrician, then it's a week to get them, and then EWEB comes back.
Why did you need an electrician?
Well, if you have a line to a house that's down, like let's say a branch takes the line, they're worried that the mast might have gotten bent. And are there other reasons?
Yeah, a lot of times so we own the meter, and then the wire up to the meter box, but the meter box and the mast part of I think that's part of the can. So if that gets pulled over and rips out the meter base or damages the meter base or something, so we can't put the meter back in, then that's a customer owned piece. What we are talking about, so with the smart meter installs, what we've done is we've contracted electricians so they're just on call essentially, so we can get a quick turnaround. So if we show up and we can't install a meter, we get the electrician right out there. So I hope we can get to that point where we can get some electricians on quicker
Wait, can I
response.
paraphrase what I think I heard you say? I think you said that if people have the smart meters and there's an outage like that, that you'll have on contract electricians who automatically go out and the homeowner doesn't
No.
need to.
That would be nice.
Oh,
But,
okay.
what I'm-
I guess I get
So when
deep here.
we're going out, we're installing the meter for the first time. We're swapping out the meter
Yeah.
for the old meter. If we find something that's not safe or something that's in the customer-owned equipment, we have an electrician on, or, company on retainer that we can call and have them come in and fix that before we put the meter back in service. Ideally, I mean, that's another thing that's we did learn in the storm, thank you, was we had, I want to say 10,000 meters, smart meters installed. And they, even as messed up as some of our systems were, it was very, very handy to have that and the information we got from those.
So related to that, if my power goes out tonight, is EWEB going to know, or do I have to notify you?
If you have a smart meter, in theory, what it's supposed to do, and it's working pretty well, is it'll shoot out a message saying, your power's out. And we have dispatched people occasionally for that, so.
If I have a net meter for a solar system, is that a smart meter automatically, or does it have to be a special smart meter, or never a smart meter? You know the choices.
You won't have a choice. That won't be automatic smart meter, I think.
It'll be an automatic smart meter.
Yeah, I don't think those are opt out.
But people are still coming in.
Correct.
Okay. But,
We just haven't got to your area of the neighborhoods, apparently.
so you're saying I don't have a smart meter yet?
No.
Even though it's
Well-
it's a net meter for solar system?
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a smart meter.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have 30,000 smart meters out of 90 some odd thousand installed.
And it's an active, you're going to get one unless you opt out?
Somebody's phone is.
I just got a voicemail today saying
They're coming?
they're coming.
Yeah, good.
And I'm wondering, because our gates are locked, how
How do they normally read it?
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
As far as no one's, in 3 years, no one's come through the gate, so it must be a smart meter, right?
It might be a radio read, I don't know.
You can just push the button through the fence. I think they come in. I've seen them just go in people's
Yeah,
yards.
they don't
They're
come
very
through.
brave. There's barking dogs and they just walk right in.
Yeah.
They're so brave.
So
Our
in
gates are
between
locked.
smart and dumb meters is radio read, you said?
Yes.
How's that work?
So that was one of the initial iterations of smart meters. It had a little transmitter on it, and we installed those for like if the homeowner didn't want you to enter the yard, or there was dogs, or it was dangerous, or whatever. So you'd drive by it and you'd have a reader and it read it. So-
First generation
Right.
smart meter.
We're taking all those out
Yeah.
and going to the Lumina system.
And do those work on those don't work on Wi-Fi? Do they feed something into the service that gives, how does a smart meter work?
So the smart meters we're using are, they transmit once an hour for 1 second, and they send out a signal, and we have collector antennas mostly in the substations. And then the substation, the collector has a gadget in it that shoots it back all to somewhere in the cloud or at EWEB. Again, this is not my area, the IT part of it. But so it's a signal that comes out of the meter and goes up to the antenna. And it just downloads its data and sends it off roughly every hour.
So for someone who's worried, it's like 1 second, 1 hour of transmission.
It's actually about a second a day total.
1 second a day.
Yeah.
Microwave's probably more dangerous, sounds like, or a cell phone.
I think it's a microwave radio signal, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, the duration and intensity is pretty small.
It's a cell phone,
Yeah.
same frequency range-ish. It's a cell phone.
Rob, I just wanted to, just for the audience's knowledge, I just did a meter replacement this year, and so this is what I learned is that, yeah, the mast and the meter base is mine, and the wires in it are mine up to the point where the EWEB has a little tie-in, so that part of the wire that's hanging out of your weatherhead, that's yours, and then where it splices in, that line up to the pole is EWEB's. Yeah, and then of course it's EWEB's meter that plugs in there. Right. And then if you want to underground it, you can do that. I talked to EWEB about that, and then you would run conduit right up to the pole. I think 10 feet up the mast, and then they take it from there. Yep.
So I'm going to go back to the microgrid question. Yeah. I'm doing a little research on resilience, and there was an article in the Register Guardian in 2016 where EWEB said that it was planning for a set, well, it sounded like set of microgrids, and would report back in 2 years about the progress.
Yep. So we started that project and ran into some difficulties with the contracting and so forth. So, but the first one that we installed was out there, Howard. So, and that was installed, put in service, geez, when was that, last October? About a year ago.
But so what's the vision then for microgrids? I was thinking that maybe what you were planning on doing was basically giving us a second set of grids so that when the major grid got hacked, there would be microgrids. Are microgrids just designed to service specific small locations? Yes. What's a microgrid?
So it could be anywhere. So in this case at the school, there's a set of batteries. There is a diesel generator, and there is a solar panel, and then there's a connection to the main grid. So if the main grid goes out, the system automatically converts to its internal controller, and depending on what's going on there, normally the batteries take over and start producing electric power. If the batteries go down and the solar's down, then I think the diesel generator kicks in. So you can scale those, right?
Yeah.
So our next one will be at our operations center. And that'll be, I think, 2 or 3 times as big as the one at Howard. So the problem right now is the controller and the battery are fairly expensive compared to some other kind of technologies. So just a straight up diesel generator is cheaper in some ways. There's maintenance, and of course, if all your fuel's in Portland and it's in quicksand up there, and you can't get any fuel, you're dead in the water. So we're it turned out to be a little more expensive than we had at first imagined. So we're going to we're still trying to work with so there's a couple uses for the microgrids. One is the emergency thing, like I mentioned. The other is, though, I was talking with you about power prices, right? Mm-hmm. So power prices fluctuate throughout the day. At night, they're cheaper. So if we could charge the battery at night and then use the battery during the day to generate and offset some of our more expensive power costs, that's another use. That's the one that's kind of got us hung up a little bit in all the red tape, this, that, and the other thing. So we're getting to the point where we're ready to work on and get some information out of that.
So is the system empowered, the battery and solar system size, be able to run the well pump for an extended period?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We can run that for weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Run the what?
The well pump.
The well pump.
Yeah.
And that's not a small load, it's not a few light bulbs or something.
Yeah. Now the vision is for that system there so again, if it's a FEMA gathering spot, people go hang out in the gym, right? They set up cots, they do all that, power up the lights, and keep that facility up and running. Yeah.
Do we have one near us?
No, not yet.
You came in a little late, but they would have a well at Fairgrounds.
Oh, that's right, I remember reading that. You're working on it, or do we have to go to Howard?
No,
The water.
There will be one at Lane Fairgrounds.
Oh, there will be, okay.
Yeah.
And the microgrid too?
I would love to put one there for a number of reasons, because it's a very electrically happy place for me. And it's got a lot of space.
It's got a huge amount of space.
And Lane County's easy to work with, so we'll see.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for the but.
So the water from the wells, I understand, is not treated water. It's water that we will have to purify. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes. And so there's instructions how to do that.
So you said Howard is a FEMA gathering site?
I'm not sure if it is exactly or not. We typically, schools are, high schools. If you get, there's a web page that talks about that. And there's another, we aren't necessarily in the, it's a great opportunity for cooperation with FEMA, and DHS has talked to us about the airport. There's just a lot of agencies to alphabet soup with, but it's a good question.
I'm just just for clarification, you're talking about the microgrid hooking up to the main grid, but that's not going to be anything that matters if we have a cascade. That the microgrid will just be used for powering Howard and keeping Howard going, for instance.
Kind of. So, and again, I don't want to get too nerdy on you, but so if we create this resilient string spine with all the critical loads hooked up, and we have a generator source, a lot of generators aren't built to start on their own. And so what I'm hoping and what we're working towards is having microgrids be some stored energy to help us, what we call black start some of the main generators. We may have, Portland General has a great program set up right now. They are funding all kinds of, like the hospital. Hospital has some great big sets of diesel generators that sit there and basically do nothing but run once a month for maintenance. Mm-hmm. So they are paying hospitals and places like U of O to fire up their generators to offset that peak load I was talking about. Mm-hmm. So if prices go too high on power, it's cheaper to run the diesel and pay off the hospital to run their generators for a little bit than it is to buy power in. So that's a really cool opportunity as well. It's not carbon friendly, but.
Is EWEB ever going to look at differential pricing, do you think? Electricity is cheaper at 2 in the morning than it is at 8 in the morning when everyone's using it?
Yes, so going back to smart meters, the main selling point for smart meters is that we will be able to offer products, electric products that will get us towards that kind of thing. Yep.
Okay, let me ask it a different way. I hear that some places, they say, charge your electric vehicle at 3 in the morning because the rates are cheaper than they are at 8 in the morning when everyone's making coffee and stuff.
So what the smart meter does then is it measures every 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I think we're doing.
How much you're using?
Yeah. Right now, your regular meter just does it once a month. Okay. So in order for me to reduce give you a lower rate, I got to know what you're using at that time. So that's the real value in the smart meter, is it's giving us information that we can then again work with customers to come up with these time use or usage rates or whatever you want to call this.
But right now, EWEB charges the same for a kilowatt hour.
Yeah. We have no way
24 hours a day.
We have no way to do it any other way.
Okay, but you're thinking maybe at some point you would be.
Absolutely. That's the goal. Yeah.
What about the projections for electric vehicle use increasing? I'm sure that's part of your long-term planning.
Yes and no. It's tricky. It's kind of one of those things you have to guess at, right? How many people are going to use them? What kind of infrastructure they need? What kind of discharging kind of things? It's challenging. So I think the distribution world is going to be different. So the so-called behind the meter kind of thing. So your car, for instance, if you have an electric vehicle, it might be, in fact, this can be done right now. If your car's sitting there at 180%, you pull into Kmart and plug in, and you're part of a service in New York, they could buy your power from you. and take your battery down to 60%. Well, it plugs into the EWEB system, right? So what does that mean? Somebody in New York's fine, it's challenging.
And then the whole peak load management thing where some newer appliances are able to, like your dishwasher could be controlled from when it starts by the utility, if the utility was doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's even, so we get real crazy and think about it.
Water heater and stuff.
What if you buy, from Amazon, you buy a dishwasher, and then an option is you buy the power for the rest of the dishwasher's life for $200. And you start thinking about those kind of things.
I go do some calculating saying, but it would only cost me $100.
Yeah.
I just plug it in.
Or maybe it
cost me $500.
$500, yeah. So those are the kind of things that options, I think will be coming in the future. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, to circle back to Snowmageddon.
Yeah.
At the neighborhood level, what, say, 3 things would you recommend residents do to get ready for winter storms, just at their own place, and then, say, at a block level, or within a small group of neighbors?
I think there's really 2 things. One is think about, you have to be prepared to go camping for 2 weeks. You have to be set up as well as you can. The second part is, and you touched on it, I think, is get in touch with your neighbors, see what they have. Does this guy over here have a chainsaw? Lady across the street has the extra porta potty. And as you figure out the resources in the neighborhood that you can combine and share, I think that's probably the next level of thing that's going to happen, especially in sort of the Cascadia kind of event where you won't have internet or pipes or anything going. So then you'll have to go get the water and back. So maybe the neighbor's got the wheelbarrow and the other guy's got the 10-gallon drum or whatever, So I think working, and so this is a great group to have those discussions with your neighbors and things.
In Friendly Neighborhood, our emergency preparedness team has had a push over the last year and a half to get blocks organized in the Map Your Neighborhood groups.
Yeah.
And we set an initial goal of having 100 groups formed, and we're about a third of the way there.
That's cool.
We just had one neighbor, or one of these groups who's just a block that way. People from that group, they just met here immediately preceding this meeting to go through some more of their logistics.
So I would say you asked about 3 things.
Sure.
So I told you 2. The third is if you have thoughts and concerns and all that. So I answer to elected officials. So just like the city, just like Lane County. So if you have concerns, thoughts, whatever, make sure you pass them on to the EWEB Board of Commissioners or whatever, there's obviously a lot I can do as the executive or whatever. But also, I think the elected officials are in a tougher spot. People at my level, in my business, we get it. It's not a stretch to figure out that there's going to be some problems, right? And I've got a job and I've got money, I can do stuff. Elected officials are in a tough spot. They need to get reelected again, possibly, or they have their own thing, or they've got this, and they don't want to make a promise here. So it's tougher for them to get on board with committing money and resources. So if you have concerns and thoughts and things you want to see move ahead, make sure you get a hold of that process, because they do listen. It's surprising they do. It doesn't seem like it, but they do. Yes?
One of the things that I know that was kind of a surprise, but was very effective in the Philippines, is that the ham radio community came in, and because they were independent radio operators, and I know that you may have talked about this before when you talked about personal radios, but do you know that community? Have you connected with them? A lot of them are emergency preparedness trained.
No, we have not so much. Yep, that's an opportunity for,
Yeah,
that is an opportunity to work on,
There's a very active group. They meet weekly, and it just seems like tapping into that resource is just an important thing to do.
Well, the disaster relief trials that did not happen this year, but has happened for at least 2 years, possibly 3 years, that was CERT, EWEB was part of that. With bicyclists going all over the city on scavenger hunts to deliver a dozen of unbroken eggs and a cooler full of penicillin to another place to actually try to coordinate what would happen if we needed people to band together and work together in
road structures.
Limited. Yeah, with limited, with no gas, possibly no electricity. A lot of carbs were required, I remember that.
Logistics is a huge issue.
Yeah, but also just the networking of the organizations to be able to communicate and understand what is required to get those 2 5-gallon buckets of water to your house. Is it easier by bike? Will there be people who are willing to do that for money? There might be. That kind of stuff.
Do you have cash?
Right, do you have cash? Are you willing to trade for your apples from your tree? I mean, that's what resilience is actually getting down to the nitty-gritty and camping for 2 weeks with your neighbors.
Right. I think one of the things that I've noticed is, as I've been doing this the last 3-4 months, talking to different peer utility groups, is we've become so accustomed to communicating our cell phones and even picking up a telephone or whatever that we're not doing a good job of wrapping in the cell phone companies. And so we have been working with both Verizon and AT&T, and man, they are aggressive about resiliency and setting up systems, and they're really after it. It's pretty impressive.
Does that mean they'd put energy into at least having texting available and from their system?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean by aggressive? What are they doing?
They are aggressive. They are, so if you look at some of these disaster scenes, you'll see like pop-up, I think they call them cows.
Yeah,
Cows.
one at the country fair,
Yeah.
there's a tower out there.
They have different acronyms for them, but they're investing. We're gonna go tour Verizon here next week and talk to their emergency manager, but they just keep, and they've got cash and they're dumping money into this kind of thing because it's, they see it as a need. AT&T they have the government is, federal government is sponsoring or paying for a complete separate cell network for emergency providers, so EWEB and a bunch of local folks, so we each get one phone, but it's on this separate network. Yeah.
So with respect to that, I talked to some folks from the city, and they suggested that what we need to do is to set up essentially a cell phone tree. So you get one call to somebody out of state, and you give that information to the people out of state, and then they get the information to all your family and friends, so that instead of having, hundreds, millions of phone calls going out, one phone call per household. And that seems like an incredibly smart way to do it. And one thing I was going to say, with respect to the Snowmageddon, we also were a small user that was out for a while, and the communication was really important to our mental health, to see that things were happening. And so I think that one of the things that really needs to be on everybody's mind is, how is communication going to work? Because the more effectively we can communicate, the fewer rumors, the less misinformation.
Yep. That was definitely something we learned from 2016 to this year. We made a huge leap, and I've got all kinds of stats I can throw at you, but we had, when we revamped our process, we started with that customer interface piece first. We got better at it, but we can do a lot better. And so this summer we revamped again some things on it, making it easier for because what we don't want to do is be bugging the line guys, right? Where's your stat? All that. So we're really getting this narrowed down to not keeping them working and then keeping the internet folks and customer service reps, all that. We're in the process of moving everybody from the headquarters building over to the operations center. So everybody will be in the same building now, which I think will help as well.
So if we did have a big disaster where the water distribution centers are active, those could also be information distribution centers where groups like EWEB and the county one not to be posting information there in some fashion.
Yes.
These are people we don't.
Yeah, that's sort of our dream.
Yeah.
And that's why we're working with AT&T and Verizon to see if we can, to be fair, they want to do their own thing and they want their own control of everything.
Sure.
So,
So EWEB has a good communication infrastructure. Is there any connections of potentially using that as emergency communication for outside of EWEB?
So we are, our radio and fiber systems are getting agents, so I'm trying to figure out how to bolster those and create those connections. We're part of a interoperability group with for the radio systems, and so there's about 10 of us on this thing, fire department, City of Eugene, police, Springfield police, anyway, a bunch of folks, public users, trying to figure out how to work into the state network, and there's a lot of things you can do with radios, so it's an opportunity.
I think of the fiber network as well, or is that being a thing that might survive and be useful in a disaster?
Yeah, so the experience has shown that you want to have a communications network that has a fiber path and a radio path.
Okay.
So especially like in the fires, boom, fiber's gone. The microwave dishes and whatever, you can readjust those and bring a generator, plug them in, but sometimes the radio site burns down and you can't get to it, so the fiber path. So this whole resiliency thing, and this is, unfortunately, all this costs a lot of money, right? So part of this, I've only got so much budget, so there's all this tension between, keeping rates low and we haven't had a rate increase for 4 or 5 years, and so, but at the same time, we're trying to do this, that, and the other thing, so it's an interesting.
So that's where the, if you will, talking to the political side of it helps the priority list probably.
It does, yeah. It helps on the strategic end. So when I go talk to the board, say I need some money for this, then they can say, okay, I kind of get that where it's coming from. And they're participating in a lot of events as well. Their education level's coming up.
If they hear 10 times more complaints about race than they hear about concern about disasters, then they'll have to represent their constituents.
Typically, yeah.
I'd be happy to pay more if there were microgrids being built. I mean, I'd be happy to pay a lot more in taxes if it wasn't going to war. So I think probably a lot of people would pay for things that they knew that they were going to benefit from at a real local grassroots level.
Yeah.
You could opt in, like an add-on.
Yeah.
Or you can build your own if you put some money.
Yeah.
Or do some crowdfunding or something, you guys looked at things other than rate increases that are, spread out? Or
No, that's a little touchy for the
There's
charter.
equity issues about that.
Yeah.
We would be able to probably, our local community would be able to afford to pay for better service. But not everybody could.
But they would join you. They would try to join you.
Possibly, yeah.
It doesn't do you any good to just communicate, like here, you'd want to, improve your communication for a broader group so that other people would benefit even if, it's funded here and goes there.
Yeah, we really need there's technical answers to all this stuff, but, we really need to get bring in that community aspect, because, a lot of times I think I'm so smart and I got the right answer, and then it's just like, oops, that was the wrong thing, so, because that totally blew up, right? People are upset about it, so it's all that, we have to do a good job of working together.
I have another Cascadia type question. At one point, there was talk about having one of the wells at Adams School. Is that no longer?
I don't remember Adams in particular. I know we're looking at a couple sites after, so we're doing the Science Center,
What do you mean by the science center, the Jefferson?
Near Autzen Stadium.
Okay, science center, the real science center.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, Wayne County, I think one maybe up north by Shopko, and then we're looking at a couple down here, the ball field and one other spot, which I can't remember.
South Eugene, is that still, well, that's also, that's really close to Civic.
Yeah. Like I said, it's more challenging in the south, so I haven't seen the far out projection list yet. We're trying to do 2 or 3 a year.
And I thought there was talk about having it at whatever the Jefferson School is called now, AT.
Yeah.
Arts, not,
Arts and technology.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't remember that, or I don't know.
but for sure, there's talk of having one at the fairgrounds.
Great, yeah. that
And
will
then
be-
if something happened, one of us from each of our groups would go to the fairgrounds and get information. That's where we would go to get information too. Correct? Do you think, maybe?
I like the idea.
That's a good idea.
And I'm taking it back. As soon as we get done there, I'm writing it down, so.
But we do know that's where we go to get water.
Yeah, it's so,
And the water is where all the information is.
Yeah.
It's true all over the world.
Yeah, there we go. Over here.
So we just about done here with questions for Rod? I know we've kept him a lot longer than he said on the stage.
Well, this has been really great.
Yeah.
I have one question
Yeah.
about, not a Cascadia level disaster, but more of a snow disaster or whatever. I just never heard of the stormwater or the sewer being affected by something. And I'm just wondering, does that happen if I just not heard about it because we haven't lived in town that long?
No, again, that's a bigger concern and more of the, even, it doesn't have to be a Cascadia earthquake, if you think about, there's a couple things going on. There's pipes in the ground, right? And they're susceptible to ground movement and breakage. So there's that, but there's also, just like water has to be pumped, it's got to be pumped out too.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's power issues, then it can't flow.
So we probably know that that was an issue. If we didn't have water, we wouldn't have sewer, right?
Like you said, they have backup generators. It's more, if there's a multi-week outage, it's an issue, but it's like an overnight outage, probably not.
Oh, yeah. No, for a short outage, that's not an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, has there ever been a sewer lack of pumping problem here in Eugene that you know of?
Honestly, don't know.
Okay. I've never heard of it.
There may have been outages, and I'm sure they've got, just like we do, we've got ways to flip-flop stuff around. Actually, another thing I'll kind of look into, just out of curiosity.
We don't have a lot of time for part 2 here of our, were we still gonna do a brainstorming activity or something?
Tell me about that.
Oh,
I see you brought a flip chart. The person who was planning on facilitating tonight called in sick.
aha,
So,
okay,
but I saw you have a flip chart.
yeah.
Let me just say thank you to
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We can let him
Thank
speak
you.
out.